I spent a lot of money on my hobby, but the best money I ever spent on my hobby in terms of cost versus fun was the stuff I made myself. There's all kinds of DIY crafts in this hobby, and they're all amazing. People make terrain and minis and maps, and I don't know how to do that, but I can write. Handouts with writing are a cheap and easy way to make something cool, and it's kind of crazy. In today's episode, I'll show you two kinds of handouts I've made for my players using nothing more than a printer, a word processor, and an unhealthy amount of caffeine. Welcome to Mystic Arts, where one video tells you to phone it in, and the next one tells you to go the extra mile. My name is Daði, I'm a professional writer, director, and I've been DMing for a little over a decade. When my party wanders around the industrialized metropolis of Blackguard, they will inevitably come to a street corner where a paperboy hawks the morning paper. For the low price of 2 banknotes, they'll be able to buy a single copy of the paper, which I make. I spend an afternoon writing up a newspaper for my players to read in character. It's a lot of fun, and it helps round out the details of the setting through plot lines my players aren't interacting with. They'll read about the big movers and shakers and what they're up to, who's voting on what bills in Parliament, what the nation as a whole is getting up to, crises in faraway places, and it's all right there in the paper. When I hand these out, the players shut up, sit down, and read the whole thing. And they love it. They'll discuss and analyze the articles afterward, sharing their fictional opinions on current fictional events, debating their worldviews and hypothesizing on what is going to happen next. These are my newspapers. I have made them for every single time we play in our Blackguard sort of murder mystery campaign. And really they're not that complicated. It is an A3 size of paper, which means that it's in this sort of typical page form factor. And I have typed it all up with 3 columns and then several articles. The front has the slug line, the main sort of header underneath, and then the main article here and a second main article down there. And then on the back side, we've got a whole page of just articles. These smaller articles are about yay in size. I don't know what that is, like 4 paragraphs. And that means I fit about 3 on the back on each column. And I've got 3 columns. Got them chunk it down like this. And then I stick here on the top as well, I put a little column, which is written by a columnist as opposed to by a journalist. So that's like an opinion piece. And then sometimes I'll put in a little space for advertising just to sort of help round out the world. I have 4 of them in front of me right now, but I've done way more than this. I can't seem to find all the pages. And they're different depending on whether my players are playing in Red Yard, they might get access to the Red Yard Tribune, or if they're playing in Blackguard, in which case they'd get access to the Blackguard Journal. And what's great about these is you can hide all kinds of little world-building details right on the page. For instance, I put in the date, such as what day of the week it is, what day of the month it is, and what month it is, as well as the year. And it says year 1424 since the founding of the Etroxian Empire. So already there is, world building details just in the first line of the page. And then this one is designed by me. I studied graphic design in school, but you could do similar stuff on things like Canva. And then I've got the main headline up here. This I also assembled in Illustrator, but then the rest of this is all done in Microsoft Word. It actually isn't that complicated to do. I sit down and I just type up paragraphs and I try and make sure they sound sort of journalistic. So I try and avoid putting opinions in the articles themselves unless they are written by a columnist for the opinion piece here on the back. In which case I change the framing. So in the columnists on the back, I might write, I don't intend to make a habit out of column writing, but I think it's vital I tell my side of the story in this moment. As I've spoken about during the trial process, I learned of Atmos directly from the so-called Atmos 5. So here somebody's talking in first person, and when you get to the bottom, you discover it's Celia Powell, who is the first Chancellor of the Republic. So the head of government is writing a column in the paper. That's noteworthy, right? It tells you a lot about the time we're living in if the head of government is taking time to write columns. But on the front or in the other articles, they're all written from a sort of journalistic, omniscient third-person narrator, and they make sure to not include any opinions in the text unless it's a quote given by the person they're talking to. For instance, this one says, unemployment benefits ruled out by Aldworth is the headline. Then it goes on to say, "It is not in the interests of this nation that we implement the benefits for the unemployed," said Horace Aldworth to a group of reporters yesterday while talking to questions on his new initiative for growth. "In an economy, we incentivize that we want more of and disincentivize that which can be harmful." He continued saying, "Those unable to find unemployment can make use of their bi-monthly stimulus packages and may use it to pursue jobs." So I'm putting in like economic details of my nation right here in this page. Now, some players, their eyes might glaze over reading this, but other players, they might form an opinion of this guy. They might immediately conjure analogies in their head to who this politician Aldworth is and what he believes. And the paper is also a great way for them to sort of learn what is going on in their nation. Monarchy Abolition Act proposed by Celia Powell. 19 imperial decrees issued yesterday, a record. Central bank projects growth for another year. So there's all these sort of economic details about what's happening in the world. And then also details about what happened in the adventure. The big headline in this paper, 3 cops killed in police raid turned violent, is an article talking about an event the players were there for. They fought these cops. And in fact, one of the players out of the entire party, one player killed all 3 cops. In the adventure, the police officers were like mind controlled and were going after the players. And one of the players, who was playing a Radigan, was thinking, screw all this. I'm gonna kill all the police officers that are chasing us down. I don't give up. So this article is talking about that and talking about where all that sort of stuff is coming from. There's a lot of detail going on here, and sometimes I'll stick in secondary or tertiary characters that I think are important in the nation that the players are playing in. Sir Henry Sachs, Susan Muller, Sir Harold Wellesley, Horace Aldworth, Hayworth, John Reynolds. All of these characters are important to the background of the nation that the players are playing in, but they're not important in the adventure right now, but they may be later. So this is a good way for me to sort of world build in front of the players. I write down a bunch of names, I give them jobs and opinions, and they're quoted in the paper, and then people might quote opposite them. For instance, this Monarchy Abolition Act article has 2 politicians arguing about a policy they proposed. One politician is, this is a bold piece of legislature that's going to rein in the emperor's autocratic tendencies. And another politician in the same political party is saying, this is not enough. This goes nowhere near far enough. Here's what I did for Redyard. They're talking about peace in our time. The Partition of Ariston signed by the Emperor. Sometimes I just put in sports information. Shaman Tooth Eater victorious in the Lion's Den. The Lion's Den Coliseum was sold out last night for what was advertised as a fight of the decade. Sometimes they'll discover all kinds of things, like which sort of corporations are working with each other. And then they might find agents of those corporations in the adventure, and they might discover this faction works with that faction, this faction works with this faction. And in the paper, those parent factions hate each other, meaning these 2 guys are on opposite teams. So we can use that to our advantage. But sometimes it's just world building. I can go spend ages on this stuff, and my players love it. And the thing is, you'd think getting stuff like this printed might be expensive, but it really isn't, especially when it's compared to buying stuff like minis and dice and books, all of which I buy a lot of. But out of those things, the broadsheets are so much more memorable to my players. A set of single issue, 6 copies, runs me somewhere between $10 and $20 in Iceland, depending on sheep money conversion rates. Less than a hero mini, or about 1/6 of the price of a new D&D book. And yeah, it's basically single use, but invites the players into my world in a way that nothing else ever could. It draws them in. Now, let me show you a completely different kind of handout. But first, a word from our sponsor. Steinhardt's Guide to the Eldritch Hunt fuses Soulsborne inspiration with Lovecraftian horror to create monstrous D&D setting book to unleash on your table. Fight against absolutely demented foes, twisted abominations, and fallen fiends. Empower yourself as a hunter with blasphemous magic, steal the powers of eldritch beings, and unleash your bestial instincts. Beware losing your humanity in the savagery of the hunt. The madness is omnipresent, and there are 300 effects that will shatter your psyche if you're not careful. D&D Beyond just launched a player pack for the book, and the whole book itself is full of goodies too. And if you get both, you'd find everything from 4 grimdark adventures, 12 twisted species, 16 nightmarish subclasses, and plenty of tools for dungeon masters. There are 4 adventures, there are 12 unique environment-altering moons, 50 fearsome foes, and 40 fully illustrated trick weapons, and expanded firearm options. You know me, I love me some firearms. So go join the hunt today and check out Steinhardt's guide to the Eldritch hunt on D&D Beyond, starting now. And there's a link in the description so they know who sent you. This one time I knew a foreign spy agency called the IIC had compiled files on the heroes and their efforts. Only a couple of them knew that their mission had been started by the IIC, which had a long since lost control of the group and was now wondering how best to direct the heroes without it reflecting badly on the IIC, the spy agency. So, when a new player joined the group as a rogue, I convinced him to play as a member of the IIC, as a spy working for the spy agency, and I handed him a thick dossier on the group, an in-universe file on the heroes, on the operations, everything the IIC had been doing behind the scenes to direct the group, and crucially, a detailed file on each hero, their background, their parents, known associates, and how to fight them if push came to shove. This manila folder is the Project Kingmaker espionage, IIC file that I made. And I'm really quite proud of it. It's quite hefty, it's big, it's got a bunch of goodies in it. And I just remember the excitement on my players' faces when they saw it. Once you open it up, you can see in here there is a bit of paper at the very front, signed by His Majesty the Emperor, refusing permission to share this file with the main characters. The Emperor was concerned that the main characters would leak it. The spy who requested the file then sent a copy of this response to the First Chancellor, the head of the War Committee, and there is a response letter that says, Harding, give them what they want. Signed, Krej. This is a reference to World War II, in particular when Winston Churchill said, give them what they want, in response to what to do about these mathematicians up at Bletchley Park as they were cracking the Enigma machine and eventually invented the computer. Here, Krej is saying, give the main characters, the Kingmakers, what they want. And inside, there are 3 little sort of subfolders. These subfolders each have a project title that I just wrote out with a bit of pencil. And the first one is Project Information. You flip that one open. It's got a foreword signed by the head of the Espionage Division. It's got some general information on how all of this started, who has operational clearance to read this file, not the main characters. And it's got an Imperial Notice of Operation. This is them starting the file. When they first launched an operation to go influence things in this other country, they had this note along with a hand-drawn picture. It's not actually hand-drawn, it's just an effect on a bit of commissioned art I got, a bit of handwriting. Included here is an illustration of Obsidian's cover identity, Felix Norman, and then a signature M for Mansfield. And you can see here there's all kinds of details on it, who the operatives are, what their goals are, what they're trying to achieve, project history, how it started, the date, and the first date is the date that the campaign started, and everything in between, all the sort of stuff they got up to. Here's another bit of illustrated character. These various sort of summaries of things that the player characters have done so far in the adventure from when the file was updated, all of these details. There's a contract of service. This is a handout from early days of the campaign when the guy playing Felix Norman handed the rest of the player characters a contract to sign with him. They have a copy of this contract signed by a player character called Ebenezer Snape, who is no longer in the adventure. That's the first folder, just sort of a summary of everything that's going on. Then there's a dossier for each of the Kingmakers, the player characters. Here, this is not commissioned art. I think this is from Magic the Gathering. At the moment, her name escapes me. I'm certain somebody in the comments is going to be able to point it out. She's Orsov, but this is a sort of sketchified version of that, which I just ran through Photoshop. And then a file on a particular character, Natalia Winters. This 55-year-old half-elven female is 5 foot 9 inches tall, weighs about 148 pounds, dark brown hair, fair skin. So this is supposed to help them identify the operative. General background, born in Quinrell, raised in the Order of Insight. Sold her shares in the ATG, went on to become a pivotal political operative in the Old World. She secured an Atroxian investment in the Waterdavian economy, facilitating an alliance between the Barons of Andria and the Viscount of South Beach. Current whereabouts, new facility in Sintercott under the protection of the king. Aliases, none. Known conspirators, who else does she work with? And in the event of strife, close any distance immediately and proceed by disarming her of her magical walking staff. It allows her to cast all kinds of spells. Then begin assaulting physically thereafter. Do not give her an opportunity to surrender or negotiate. Her magic are of an unknown source, and the IIC has yet to determine if they can be taken away from her. If the target is engaged, kill her. So what to do if these characters, if the player characters become a thorn in the IIC side, they have a little note on how to kill them. Here is Lazarus's file. Again, another one of these sort of sketched illustrations. And this one I remember, in the event of strife, no strategy is deemed possible to succeed. Suggested course of action, retreat. If a permanent solution is required, cooperation with the bird watcher is recommended. Initiate an ambush with overwhelming force, spellcaster is required. Even then, there is nothing to suggest he won't be resurrected moments later. And this is an example of the kind of drama that came out of these. It says here that Morgan, this is an artificer that joined the party. It says here, over the years she invented weaponry later found their way into the Overlord's hand, such as an experimental arcanotechnical long-range artillery prototype which was responsible for the death of Korbuka's father, the Orc Duke. None of the players knew this. Nobody knew, but the IIC had found out. They thought he just died on the front lines, but they didn't know that he died bombarded by her experimental weapons. These were a source of high drama. A few files are missing here because the players ended up retrieving their files and removing them from the dossier. I don't know that the IIC doesn't have copies of these things. Maybe they do. And at the very back, there is an operations section. These contain ops that the IIC had done in order to aid the Kingmakers in their mission. And sometimes they'd sort of include hints at the wider IIC world, what kind of stuff the spies are getting up to in general. So here, for instance, is Operation Unsinkable. Operational objective, retrieve a dwarven ironclad. The dwarves had these special, better ships, ironclads, instead of just Age of Sail ships. And the IIC wanted to get their hands on them. And there is a sort of constant log back and forth as they are trying to get their hands on this. This here continues. And there's a little handwritten note that's been attached. Let's see what it says. Operation Unsinkable is a part of Project Opposition Research and not an operation issued by Project Kingmaker, but rather a report we've included here unedited due to its connection to Morgan Chalendny, who has since then been considered a Kingmaker by this project. So the spies are doing stuff all over the place, and this was a part of her backstory, Morgan's backstory. So I ended up putting it in here so that there is a reference to what exactly the spies are doing. Operation Legacy, Dragon's Vault, Wolf's Son, Pigeon Platoon, Broken Obsidian, Deepwind Waterfall, like they're trying to get help in. Operation New Obsidian, Lord's Ransom. There's a bunch of these. Usually it's just 3 segments, one sort of describing what they're trying to achieve, and then the second section going, we have logged this response, and then a signature. And I think there are like 5 or 6 of these missing, because again, the players removed them from the file. They didn't want Rollo, who was playing the spy, to have access to it. Now, he had already read all of it. There's all kinds of hidden storytelling in this as well, as like who's signing these things. For instance, Cass signed a bunch of them, but at some point Mansfield took over the operation. So then you've got Operation signed CD Mansfield, Caroline Deborah Mansfield. And the really old files are signed by different person altogether. So if we go back to the front here, isn't this fun? Major General Archibald Isaac Mattingly, Undersecretary of the Imperial Intelligence Committee, AIM. So this is a really old operation. It's back in 1410. That's like 20 years before any of this adventure started. 1406 it starts. Initial contact with the target through intermediary was unsuccessful. Diplomatic action requires negotiating directly with the creator of the asset. Detailed assessment provided the Dwarven Patriot wouldn't sell the asset under any circumstance. Operation unsuccessful. Request for follow-up operation approved. 1410, Morgan Chalendny, owner of Morgan Manufacturers, had full and clear understanding of her actions when she signed the purchase order for one of her prototype steamboats. The asset was acquired and a shell company has been created to compensate her work. Operation successful. Deconstruction begins immediately. So they got their hands on it in the end. Morgan, there are multiple cases of her selling weapons to the bad guys, something she had to sort of atone for through the rest of the campaign as a weapons manufacturer, that you put arms into the hands of the wrong people. Both the Invincible Overlord, who was the main bad guy for this adventure, borrowed cheekily from MCDM, but also for the Atroxians, who were a tenuous ally throughout the adventure. It's remarkable how loved the players felt. They got this whole dossier and they were enthralled by it. It served as an underpinning for a number of sessions. You know, getting the spy player to share the file, getting to look at the file, discussing the dossier pages, debating if they could ever trust the spy player, all of it elevated the game. It made it feel so personal. It was so intrinsically linked to the narrative, the moment that it was introduced. And it worked wonders. It didn't take me too long to make. You know, it's a couple of afternoons, you know, going the extra mile for sure, but it didn't take me out or anything. I was having fun. I enjoyed making them. It gave me energy. It didn't take it. No burnout. And if I felt like I had to do it, it would have been draining. But instead it was exciting fun, and I was cackling in all the little different plot threads I could do with a simple bit of handout. And like I said, they're cheap to make. I made that IIC dossier with my own printer using some beige paper I brought to the local office supply store. The whole thing maybe cost me $20. Like getting takeout in Iceland at least. And the software needs aren't complicated either. In fact, let me show you how. All right, let me show you how it works here in Word. You can see this is just a regular Word doc file. I've got these two images in here. This one for the headline, or like the slug line, or the, you know, the byline, what's it called? And then this one for the top headline. And again, it's just an image. The only reason I do it that way is so I can make sure that on the headline that they all like fill exactly out to the edge, so that they're like different font sizes to really block out the top of the page. See that collapse is bigger than economic, for instance. Or here, war is printed huge. And then there's an article underneath, and this is, the font is called American Typewriter. It's 11-point font, and I literally just go in here and type up the articles. I've set it to be justified, so it's sort of even. If it's this way, it doesn't look like a newspaper to me. I'm pretty sure newspapers use justified. If I do this again today, I would make sure that the first paragraph doesn't indent, because I don't think that's normal, but maybe it is, I'm not sure. Then I just fill up the back here, and what I tend to do is I tend to sort of think of, you know, a handful of headlines. I write them all one after the other. This here is the headline. It's 14-point font. Sometimes I have a second headline on the cover. Sometimes I don't. And then I sort of put in the headline, and then I just try and, you know, quickly write it up. Obviously, if this were an actual newspaper, the articles would probably be a fair bit longer, but I don't think that's particularly good gameplay feel for the players. They want to just get sort of the bullet points of what's going on. They don't really want to get into the weeds of all these things, and I don't want to write into the weeds of all these things. My goal is kind of to just sort of drop these things in front of them and make them immediately understand the gist of what's going on. And here there's a clue right on the back. State Patent Office reports break-in. This is one of the clues that was in the paper, but because the paper had so many instances of, you know, crime in the nation or whatever, the players didn't really look into this one, but they could have gone to the state office and discovered one major clue that they were looking for, but it never came up. Sometimes I put classified ads on the back. Dwarf seeking strong woman. Beautifully bearded dwarf is looking for love. Find me at the Longfoot Brewery tonight. Any single dwarves out there? A woman with an eye for hairier lads seeks to meet a dwarf with an eye for larger ladies, staying at the Salty Swin Tavern tonight. Oh no, they probably won't meet each other, because if one of them goes to the other, they won't be where they are. Terrible. Sad love story here on the classified ads. And then these little advertising columns, I just put them in as like a box. You can do a table and have only be, like only one row. If I put in another row, it'd come in like that. You understand? So it only is one row, and then I just type into it. These are a lot of fun. And it doesn't have to be that much. Like obviously here I've gone like sort of crazy with it and done it in A3 size paper, but you could do this with A4 and make them be smaller letter size if you're US. You could do just an A3 piece of paper, but only on the front and not on the back. And here's how I did the IIC file. I just wrote it out like this. Again, American Typewriter 11-point font. And then I'd sort of have fun with the handwriting. So I got a whole bunch of different handwriting fonts so that all the signatures would have different handwriting on them. This one's Rage Italic. This one's Mistral. This one's Rage Italic, but I sort of, you know, made them different font sizes. So the D is 26-point, the C is 36-point, and then Mansfield is 48. Just so that it looks sort of a little more handwritten. You can see one of the files that got taken out. This one includes who her true parents are. She didn't know this. This was just in the file. And I just typed these up. It doesn't take like terribly long, but it's a lot of fun. And you can add so much detail to your campaign when you do this. You can do it in Word. You can do this in Google Drive. Or we're going to copy the parameters over here. Change the font over to American Typewriter. You can go to more fonts. Maybe they don't have American Typewriter, but they might have something similar. Courier, for instance, Courier Prime. Change it to 11-point font. Take this one, centralize it, make it be bigger, and you get a fairly similar looking thing. You know, this doesn't cost any money. I know Word's not cheap, And same with, the headlines I make in Illustrator, but you can do that in Canva or other similar free software. You can just play around with these things. Like if you're not an artist like me, you can go open up your word processors or whatever at home, type up stuff in there, and then get it printed, sent out, and it immediately brings the whole world together. And it's such a good way to do world building in a way that is optional stuff for the players to interact with. How much, when they get a piece of paper, because they're reading it instead of you talking out loud at them, they can skim. They can't skim through you talking, but they can skim past the bits they're less interested in and hyper-focus or read again, get repeat readings of the stuff they are interested in, which allows them sort of more control over how they interpret the data. Because when you're just sort of word vomiting the lore dump on them, they might not realize what proper nouns there are because they can't see which ones have capital letters. But when they see it in writing, they're going to get much better bead on, oh, this is a proper noun, this is important, this is a place or a state or a thing. They get a much better look at all those things. In the event of strife, close with the target immediately. Any contest of strength would be easy to win. Grapple, silence, then bind. She's powerless without her spell casting. I remember she took that personally. Now, you might reasonably think, damn, Daði, that's a lot of work. And you're right, it can be. And if you don't want to do it, don't. If you end up making something like this because you felt you had to, you're gonna hate it. Both making it and presenting it, and every time it comes up. You can just run pre-written adventures or collage together adventures with, different encounters, each of them acting like a puzzle piece that you click together, or anything in between those extremes. It's up to you. I just know that I feed off of excitement. When I'm excited, I make stuff. And when I'm excited, my players are excited. So go find out what makes you excited and do a little bit of that to take your next game and elevate it. After introducing these big broadsheets in a couple of games, I've since started writing just a few headlines down in my notes and summarizing the articles in a sentence and telling my players what the paper says. It does the job just fine, and it keeps me sane for the time being. There's nothing wrong with it, but doing these handouts like this, there's this sort of wow factor. You get to create a big splash of, yeah, folks, I did the work. Remember our Eddie Munson video on how showmanship can elevate the game? You pick your moments there. Not all the time, not every item or scene or monster, just the thing that'll make the big splash. In fact, next time you're watching a movie or playing a video game, notice how much of it is fairly bog standard stuff. Like the new and spectacular James Bond video game, 007 First Light. It's a lot of fun, but it's basically a gallery shooter stitched together by cutscenes, like Uncharted. The basic loop isn't really innovative at all. It's just really well made and competently done. They put their showmanship in select places, like how it blends shooting bang-bang combat with hand-to-hand punch combat by introducing mechanics to throw guns and disarm enemies. That's the secret sauce, the thing that elevates the game. You can pick your one secret sauce to elevate your next game and make it memorable. Whatever it is, maybe it's a cool handout, maybe it's a villain monologue or a cool monster or a great map or a silly little frog guy. That's up to you and what makes you excited in the moment. So go forth and spread that excitement. And that's where we'll pick it up next time. This channel is run by me and my girlfriend, and if you want to go support us on Patreon, you can go click the link in the description and get some stuff. If you're feeling especially generous, you might like the video, comment, share, subscribe, etc., etc. Until next time, keep studying the mystic arts.
I was not ready for that.